Welcome everyone to today's Algorithms and Complexity seminar. Today we have Manolis Vlatakis joining us as a speaker. Manolis is a fifth-year PhD student at Columbia, studying under Michalis Yannakakis and Rocco Cerverio. He works in computational learning theory, probabilistic analysis of algorithms, and algorithmic game theory. And he's going to tell us a little bit today about optimization beyond minimization. Take it away, Manolis.
Thank you very much, Gautam. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. And let me welcome everyone to my presentation about optimization beyond minimization. As I call it, a journey in game dynamics. So before delving into let's say, the deep sea of games and optimization, I would like to share with you a mathematical story that I discovered some years ago when I was preparing a presentation for stock. So in geometry, you will see at the end of the story why I really want to share that story. So in geometry, there exists the notion of Johnson solid. So Norman Johnson, a mathematician of the previous century, defined his solid to be a strictly convex polyhedron, such that each face of which is a regular polygon, without posing no extra restrictions about the type of the polygons. Actually, in 1966, he published a list of 92 solids that they belong to that characterization. And yeah, there are obvious solutions from the ancient Greek mathematicians that they have the uniform prisms. But he didn't prove their uniqueness, the completeness of that list. He just claimed here we have 92 solids. 3 years later, Victor Zalgaler, a Soviet mathematician, proved indeed that this list is complete. Now, something very, very interesting. If I ask you if I can create a convex polyhedron, a convex solid that is constructed only by regular hexagons and regular pentagons, Zalgaler's proof excludes that. He proves that that cannot be the case. Now, I want extra points. This image is from a professor of graphics in the University of Waterloo. And he, in his free time, he achieved to construct that kind of convex polyhedron. And but you know, I can see it like a mathematical joke here that the proof said that cannot be happen. So as you can understand, oh, by the way, I can claim that with probability 1, the full audience, anyone from the audience can construct that kind of hexagons to be convex and the full polyhedron. So what is happening? The issue is that, of course, the answer of the underlying question is that Zalgaler's theorem fails because of the small near misses that always happen because of the finite accuracy that probably the professor in Waterloo tried to imitate. And this is the finite accuracy that we have about the real world measurements. And the reason that I decided to narrate that story, besides it is very interesting that in internet is very famous, the professor of Waterloo, is that I strongly feel that it describes a little bit the modus vivendi, the leitmotif that I have in my research. Because I strongly believe that as theorists, either in computer science or in optimization or in math, we have to construct theories that correspond and are strongly motivated by the real world, instead of sometimes trying to convince ourselves that the world is exactly as our theory predicts. So I could rename the title of my presentation as A Theory of Optimization about the Real World. So looking back, and trying to be honest, frankly speaking, I strongly believe that the progress that we have achieved as a community until the advent, at least, of the new century was actually determined by the following simple problem: compute the minimum of a cost function of an error loss function typically the function is non-convex to make ourselves harder and our life harder. It belongs in a high-dimensional space where we have access only to typically to the values of the function, and if we are happy and it is at least continuous and differentiable, then we get also gradient of that function. And what we know is that, yeah, if the function was convex, then the problem is easy, but otherwise it can be really, really hard with many different perspectives. There is optimization lower bounds, there is the NP hardness from complexity result. So the question is, in absence of convexity, what we can do, and it is well known that the best thing that actually the community follows is computing the local optimum. Hopefully now, for a machine learning perspective, many empirical and theoretical arguments had justified, like the work of Ronge et al., that actually this requirement, finding the local optimum, suffices for the vast majority of the machine learning tasks. In other words, looking those two loss functions, what I'm trying to say is that the loss function that we're working typically in practice, they look like the right image where almost all optima are almost equal, and not like the left one where you can find a local optimum in that wavy function, but it could be much, it could be like a dummy local minima in comparison with the global optimum. So yeah, the good news is that typically we have good functions, and to be honest, as a community, we had achieved lots of good and impressive results in this task, and also trying to, frankly speaking, we achieved that with only just one algorithm in real sense. It was a local search methodology that we call gradient descent. And I would just cite here a result that I have, and I will do it with even some small criticism, I would say. This is the first work as my PhD career, where we saw that under mild conditions, even the gradient is not necessary. You can find the local optimum and avoid all the subtle bad points that could be stationary points also of the function. And that suffices to have just the evaluation oracle of the function, and then you can just exploit all tricks of numerical analysis for finding differences. And what is interesting is that you can achieve exactly the same performance. Now, what I say, why I say that I describe that with some criticism while I'm ending my PhD is because the real question is the following: is really the way that we optimize nowadays the functions that one? And my
Sorry, one sec, Richard. Do you have a question? Sorry to.
No, I just messed up my mic. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry, I thought you were trying to ask something, and I want to. Okay, cool. Sorry, continue, Manolis.
So yeah, I will go back and I will ask, okay, we have excellent performances for many tasks, but somehow they are in clean, isolated hospital environments, I could call them. I claim that in reality nowadays, we do not optimize with that way. And I can argue about that with three different examples. First of all, typically the vector of the data can be so long that it has been distributed in different clusters of servers. In dynamic environments like a warehouse with multiple bots that contact only locally each other, sometimes it is impossible to even to describe with a centralized way the task planning for the whole warehouse. And something also that, for example, it is like the optimization perspective of privacy. We know that the restriction of data privacy arise every day, and in order to make optimization nowadays, it is even more harder because some of the restrictions, in order to protect our individuality, making harder even to collect altogether the data. So probably we'll have to do something like federated learning. So after this discussion, what I was trying more or less to claim is that it is inevitable that we have to accept that nowadays we experience the era of the rise of multi-agent learning. And what I'm trying to say is that while in the past we had focused really in the single agent situation, where probably we were in a very static environment, for a player that is trying just to optimize each lot's function. Nowadays, in the near future, we will emphasize only in the multi-agent setting, where different agents are trying to optimize competitively or collaboratively their own incentives in a probably continuous dynamic environment. And a competition or collaboration in science, this is my starting point here. When I use the phrase competition and collaboration in science, that signifies always the existence of an underlying game. And games as a notion are ubiquitous in optimization, from markets and the high frequency trading to AI game learning like the RoboSoccer, where you have a very interesting setting that we are analyzing theoretically very recently, that you have both collaboration and competition. For example, you have two different teams of robots that they are trying to collaborate, and at the same time they are trying to compete against some other players. So there is an underlying somehow coordination game and the zero-sum game, for example. There are so many different applications of optimization. Nowadays we have the auto-driven cars that they are trying to somehow to simulate the different incentives of all the cars using the different payoff signals of the sensors about which the car that has to pass first. Yeah, so different incentives from different players typically in all these situations are employed, and I can say that is last century, going beyond these classical applications. Games and min-max optimization have recently become much more popular in a wide range of signal and data processing methodologies. First of all, min-max is something very typical, for example, when you want to protect your data from a statistician that is trying to get to minimize the accuracy, to minimize the loss of an estimator, but you are trying to maximize, for example, your privacy guarantees. So there are statistical reasons, but there are also generative reasons, like the famous optimization trick of generative adversarial networks, GANs, or robust machine learning, just to name a few of these kind of applications. But yeah, going a little bit back, the issue here is the following, that while we are living from the paradise of single agent optimization, multiple different solution concepts have been proposed for the multi-agent setting. It is something that I think everyone knows, the notorious Nash equilibria for any normal form game, the coarse correlated equilibria when the players collaborate in their random strategy somehow, the Stackelberg min-max points, that they are important for the sequential games, and of course the von Neumann solution for the case of convex concave games. Now, the real question is, do all these algorithms really can be applied in practice and find a solution concept? And like a deeper question here is the following. Can we, somehow what I'm trying to describe is that what we had in the past as the computation of a local optimum, now it's like a mechanism design where we're trying to compute an equilibrium that has a game theoretic meaning close to the optimization meaning that we have, to the optimization machine learning task that we're trying to solve. So the practical experience had shown that, if you try to solve a local optimization problem, the only question that you have to solve is that you will avoid the saddle points, right? Now, in the case of min-max or multi-agent optimization, you can feel much more frustrated. The common failures include oscillatory phenomena, cycling phenomena, chaotic attractors, curious, non-meaningful game theoretic equilibria, and very recently, multiple complexity results has been shown about first-order methods. We have also some results that in some other talk I will describe about the connection of fixed point methods, fixed point theorems, and optimization. But yeah, all these problems are problems that we have to tackle right now in order to find a solution. And I decided to present them before telling you the problem, to know that here are the challenges of the games. Here is what we have to tackle and have in our mind that can happen in game optimization. And as the elders say, one step at a time, and one step at a time means let's start from the case of two agents, min-max optimization, in other words. And I say min-max because if it is min-min, then it is like we have a meta player that is playing just a single minimization optimization tasks. So, and to have it a little bit more interesting than cases that probably you have heard in the course, let's try to speak about non-convex, non-concave, zero-sum games. And in the following section, what I will try a little bit to explore is how we can discover some hidden structures for convergence guarantees. So, step by step, in the classical framework of min-max optimization, we have an objective of two arguments. And what we have here is that we want to minimize over X and maximize over Y. Typically, what happens is that competing players can choose their inputs either simultaneously or take turns, leading to what we call in optimization simultaneous or sequential games, respectively. The case of convex and concave objective, of course, has been received lots of attention. Probably you have heard lots of stuff about that problem. Just to define it mathematically, what we have here is that F is convex and over a He variable, concave over Y, and the domains of both arguments are convex sets, closed convex sets. So thus the main question here is the following. For the general case of non-convex, non-concave optimization, given first of all, given that we have the PPAD complexity results nowadays, that they describe that they are difficult, the real question is the following. We have multiple different solutions. We have some solutions that they are intractable in the worst case sense. So what we can really ask? The best question that we would like to ask is something like a characterization. These are the problems that, besides the fact that they are non-convex, non-concave, we can solve them. Okay. What I would like to try is to ask something even more restricted. Can I describe a class of games where the discussion, what is the correct equilibrium, what is the correct point of optimization, would not be a point of discussion, would be really something that would be obvious. And the last question that I would like to ask is what we can find with the typical way that we're doing that, with like the standard optimization dynamics that they are the gradient descent ascent. So let me give you a very simple answer. Maurice Sion, a very famous mathematician from Skopje, first of all, generalizes the convex-concave case to the quasi-convex, quasi-concave case, proving that such kind of games actually enjoy unique value independent. That means that the value of the game, there is the equilibrium has a value that it is independent of the ordering of minimizing and maximizing firstly the objective. However, yeah, this is not very, very interesting in comparison with the convex concave situation. But going back to my motto that we have to do theory for the practice, the question here is the following. Are the applications that we want to analyze, like the GANs, a training process that corresponds to like a very simple zero-sum game that it is non-convex, non-concave? And the answer is no. A very sweeping rejective no. The claim is that this kind of objectives include some very important hidden structure. What I'm trying to say is that the most important thing that all this kind of modeling that we look outside is that they involve what I call indirect competition in the parameters. Especially, for example, in the GANs. Let me be more precise. So here is, I really like that in my talks to give like what the people have said that they create that problem. So Goodfellow, in a very 2 years after the first vanilla case of generative adversarial network, did the following. He, in a tutorial that he presented, he said, look, I have seen so many results about what is happening in GANs, but and even in our paper, we proved some convergence to an equilibrium, but it was like a proof of concept. In practice, the players are represented with deep neural nets, and the decision and the updates are made in parameter space. So all these results, which depend on convexity actually of a convex-concave situation, they do not really apply. So that was my starting point, and I asked myself, okay, to model this indirect competition that exists in the parameter of the two neural nets, in 2019, we proposed the class of hidden convex concave games. So in this class, what we have, I will start from the end of the itemized section. So first of all, I have a hidden game, VL, let's say. This is a convex concave situation. You can imagine that L is a convex concave game. Now I feed in a convex concave objective two non-convex in general operators, F and G, but the players are not able to optimize and decide the output of the operator straightforward. The only thing that they can do is to optimize over the parameter space of these operators, over the parameter space that, of the inputs of these operators. The operators are the F and G, and the parameters are the theta and phi. So in order to make it clear, even if we have a convex function, a convex concave function L, just by composing it with two non-convex operators, like the neural nets that I have in my mind, gives me a typical non-convex, non-concave function. Now, more important.
Sorry, one question. Where did why did the term hidden come in here? Like, what's hidden about this?
Oh, yeah. The reason that I call it hidden is because the players will optimize over theta and phi, but what they would really like to do is to optimize over F and G.
I see. They optimize only the parameters rather than the model itself in some sense. Okay.
Yeah. That is many years later. I discovered that in the Mathematical Society of 60s, there was someone that tried to analyze such kind of stuff, and they call it composite convex functions, but it was even for minimization in that case. By the way, notice that even in the L2 the L2 error that we're trying to solve in a classification problem with a neural net has exactly this hidden structure. So just to follow here, the hidden structure, I really like it in my problem because it identifies the correct solution. It is very clear. What we would like is to find the von Neumann solution of the hidden game, that it is the L. So, and the second issue is that it was, as I answered the question to G, that look, actually the indirect competition that exists in GANs can be modelized, can be modeled by the indirect competition that you see in gradient descent ascent, phenomenon that you have in the parameter space between f and g. So this is the model that we will try to analyze. We optimize over theta and phi, and the only thing that we get as a result is the oracle of the gradient of the utility for different theta and phi. Of course, because we have structure, we can understand what that means, but it is not that we really can solve it out and learn what is happening about the f and g. Yeah, so this is our problem. This is our structured non-convex, non-concave games. And I will start with the first thing that it would be important to cover, like to cover our understanding and intuition, and have a proof of concept. We started by proving that all the optimization functions that we have in GANs, actually they can be written like a hidden convex concave case. And this is correct. I will give you just an example. If you think it a little bit more for people that they are familiar, F-GANs, for example, are hidden linear in the minimizer and concave in the maximizer. So, and just, I don't want to be heard like only a male guy. I mean, there are multiple applications of that also in different other fields. Just to give you an example, the hidden game that I described can describe the host parasite competition that we encounter between different species in evolutionary biology, where the parameters are the genotypes and the operators are the phenotypes of the two species. Because actually in the practice, imagine like a survival competition of two species like human and monkeys. The phenotypes, our attributes, are what they are competing, but when we reproduce ourselves, what we are doing is that we are playing the game by using our DNA. This is the idea of the problem. So I really like that model because it captures lots of different problems, that structural problems that they are described in game theory, in the different aspects of game theory. So the first problem that we tried to tackle was the hidden bilinear game. That means that, let's imagine that the VL was just X transpose AY, the classical bilinear game, and we apply the operators. And what we have shown for this kind of very structured class is that almost, okay, intuitively, what we should see, it is obvious, we should prove the cycles. The task here is to why? Because X transpose Y, let's take the identity matrix, cycles. This is something that we knew. The question is what is happening, and if this bilinearity is somehow robust, and this is the property that it is the reason that we cycle around. And this is the answer, that whatever you will apply as an operator, if it is a smooth operator, there are like a number of different situations that they are antithetical to the convergence behavior. Typically you will see cycles or divergence, or because actually, I can explain that because of, as you can see, the gradient descent ascent somehow by the chain rule will appear the gradient of the operators. So there are two cases. Either there are stationary points of the operators and we will stack on them, or we will achieve to bypass that hurdle, and we will observe the cycling phenomenon. And another reason that I like that, because it is because also in min-max optimization, sometimes people are trying to understand what is the meaning of the spurious points that the method stack. And also here it is very clear that they are the stationary points of the operators. So this is the bad news. if you are trying to optimize something like that using gradient descent, ascent, continuous dynamics, you will fail. And we did that also even for the discrete case where we observe divergence. Now, what I really like in this project is that you can prove mathematical structures like that. This is not like an experiment. This is, we saw that, yeah, it is very fancy, it is very artistic, but we can prove that we will see that kind of phenomena. This is a rock, paper, scissors game where we had applied like something like sigmoid nets, and they fight each other. And what we can see is the Poincaré recurrence, and almost cycling phenomenon that happens in high dimensions, typically in min-max optimization. Now, let's give some positive now results. I think that the main intuition behind the results, because the mathematics are very involved, and I don't want to stick to stuck on them. The main observation behind our results is that in this structured non-convex, non-concave class that we analyze, given the hidden structure, we are able to understand what is happening with the distortion of the optimization landscape. This is the main idea. And in my opinion, this is very surprising, given that F and G, first of all, are non-convex operators. And secondly, something that you have to notice, in the majority of the cases, they are non-invertible. And what I mean is, if F, for example, is an operator that gets some parameters from RD1 and gives something to RD2, then it is informationally impossible to get back, to invert the function. So that is the reason that that is also the reason of the importance of the analysis of that kind of problems. And yeah, just to give an example, the first thing that we achieved to do is that for the hidden convex concave games, the best thing that we can show in general is that the von Neumann solutions are hiddenly Lyapunov stable. But just that. And now let's understand what does it mean, hiddenly stable. That means that I cannot understand what is happening in the parameter space in theta and phi. There are different manifolds that of parameters that, in my observation, will give the same result. In other words, F and G, their values will be stable around the von Neumann solution and the corresponding equilibrium P, Q. What I cannot be sure is about the stability of theta and phi, except if you have some regularity, more smoothing assumptions for F and G. But let's go to happy points. First of all, we achieved to prove that if at least, and this is very, very interesting, I feel, because we are again in the non-convex, non-concave case, but if I can prove the structure of a hidden, strictly convex concave situation, then I can construct a Lyapunov function and prove that I have a convergence to a von Neumann solution. More interestingly, in the case of regularization, that it is very typical in ML, or very equivalently, if my hidden function was strongly convex, concave, then I can prove the convergence even in exponential rate. Now, you will ask me, of course, okay, is that all this beautiful theory constructed probably because of the continuous dynamics? Is there a magic behind the continuous dynamics that for some people also in theory, they feel that they do not belong to our community? The answer is very interesting. So first of all, in a work that I submitted with some colleagues to ICML, we present a very interesting result of hidden game, the case of two-team zero-sum game. This is the case that I described before for RoboSoccer, where we have multiple agents and that you can separate them into teams, and all of them, in order to belong to the same team, the econometric assumption is that they have the same utility, but of course they influence the utility function with different parameters. So what you have is a game where two teams have actually, for each team, we have a unique utility function, and to make it zero sum, what you do is that you sum them up to zero. Now, instead of the two-player zero-sum game, the duality gap here could be large. There is work of Vijay Vazirani and Schulman about that. But let's go in more interesting situations. What we can prove is that gradient descent ascent, extra gradient, optimistic gradient descent ascent, optimistic multiplicative weight updates, all the known discretization of what we call gradient flow at the end of the day, all of these discretizations fail to converge to a Nash equilibrium. And also, I think in the moment that we published the paper, it was the first known result of a non-convex, non-concave case where all the discretization failed at the same time. And in order to address that, we developed a new discretization framework that was based on a feedback control theory tricks. I was very happy because I discovered that the way that we that we decided to make the discretization, and it was very novel in comparison with the classical discretization. It was used for washout filters in the aviation for the Dutch movement that we see in the planes, in the airplanes. So we describe a new methodology for discretizing gradient descent ascent. We strongly believe that there are lots of interesting questions that someone can explore in that field, and they are independent of the structure of the team zero-sum games. And there is something very interesting in that methodology that hopefully we will address in the future. So
just to understand your result you're claiming here, there's one specific class which simultaneously all these different methods fail at, whereas previously I guess results showed that okay, if you take this class and GDA failed, but if you take this other class,
this is exactly the case. Let me state two different very classical examples. The gradient descent ascent for the zero-sum games cycles, but the optimistic is an excellent discretization that with the momentum that it has, it helps you to converge. On the other hand, if you play a potential game, in potential game there are proofs that for a vast collection of step sizes, the optimistic gradient descent ascent fails, diverges, cycles, do very not interesting stuff, but gradient descent ascent converges. So what we create is a class of games where all of them simultaneously fail to converge. I don't claim that that means that this is a game that it is hard for any algorithm. Here we construct an algorithm that achieves to stabilize. But it was interesting that all the classical discretization frameworks that we knew did not do that. Now, what I'm trying to say with this result is that discretization is like an engineering science and art, actually, with the meaning that given that I want to go to the multi-agent setting, I will just say the following phrase here. There is lots of work that people in computer science and optimization has not leveraged yet, and it is developed more or less from the physicists, and I will explain you why. Physicists many centuries ago necessitate the following problem. They would like to compute an integral in a Hamiltonian space where you have invariances. And when you have to do that, in order to discretize and play, for example, the trapezoid method that we know from numerical analysis, that loses a very important knowledge that physicists know, that look, this system has some invariants. So there are something that we call symplectic integration. There are lots of interesting machineries that you can apply, or here control theory feedback correctors, that you can apply them in order to control the discretization. And in the case that the continuous dynamics are stable, then you can achieve with much more robust arguments in comparison with the ad hoc arguments that exist for the classical discretization, like optimistic, extra gradient, with a much more robust way to provide the discretization that you will know that given that the continuous dynamics converge, my discretization, my stochastic approximation will also converge to that point. So just to add one more question, that it is a question that has been shown very interesting also here in Simons, and many people really like it. What is a very TCS and very interesting question is, what is the computational complexity of the equilibrium in that kind of games? We saw that it is CLS hard. And with that phrase, I mean that we can prove that it is at least as difficult as any problem of that class. By the way, yesterday, I think that class changed also again name because there are new results. But the main question is that kind of games, of course, they are PPAD hard with the meaning that if you have a Nash solver, you can solve also that games. But could be the case that they are simpler than that. We saw that they are CLS hard. The question is if they are CLS, the membership in CLS, or the membership in PPAD. And or if there is a more interesting class between those two problems. And this is a very interesting TFNP complexity question that I'm trying to address also this period. And as I said, I know that it's going late, so I will try to pass that field a little bit more quickly. You know, after solving that questions, solve is a tough word, I will say, after having some contact with that area, I try a little bit to explore myself with what is happening with multiple agents. And yeah, for the rest of the talk, I will try a little to describe you what I try to do to tame the beast of multi-agent optimization. And I will focus, for the sake of not violating lots of the time, to describe you a very surprising incompatibility. So in the presence of uncertainty and unpredictability, one of the most core demands in theory of online optimization and decision-making in multi-agent systems is what we call a regret minimization. And because I don't expect everyone to have notions about game theory, very, very intuitively, achieving zero regret in the long run means that our payoff is close to the best possible fixed policy in hindsight. And arguably, the most widely studied class of no regret algorithms is the general scheme of follow the regularized leader, or I will call it simply FTRL. FTRL operates in two spaces. The Y space is the payoff of the players, and X is the strategy of the players. And roughly speaking, while in the equation 1 of this scheme, we accumulate the historical payoff of each strategy, in equation 2, we want for each player at time t to choose the strategy that maximizes its payoff. Now, from the Cesa-Bianchi results of the weighted majority of 90s, we know very well that greedily choosing the pure strategy with the highest historical payoff does not necessarily offer a zero regret in the long run. However, what we know is that if we regularize this question of what is the what I want to play my strategy for the next round, and I will say, okay, I will find the best strategy given my historical payoff, regularized by a strongly convex function H. That trick allows us to hedge our bet smoothly and leads to no regret result. And of course, different choices of H lead to different optimization dynamics. Two very interesting choices are the Shannon negative entropy. This is the multiplicative weight updates as you know it, or the replicator dynamics. And in the case that you choose, for example, the L2 regularizer, you will get what we call online gradient L2 descent, for example. Now, again, the question as before is the following. Do these dynamics converge to an equilibrium, and what kind of equilibrium is that? And the folk answer to that question is that all no-regret dynamics converge to an equilibrium in all games. But in what sense? Formally, it is the results of Blackwell and some seminal results of game theory, but the real blanket conclusion that can be drawn is that the empirical frequency of play under no regret learning dynamics converges to what we call the set, not even an exact equilibrium necessarily, the set of coarse correlated equilibria, which is a superset of Nash equilibria. And just to show you why I don't like that as a rational rational choice of convergence, CCEs, again, I don't expect that you know them, but I can promise you that in game theory course 101, you can really find it out very quickly. CCEs has such a bad kind of rationality that the cycle here strategies for this symmetric game are the support of a coarse correlated equilibrium, but at the same time are the strictly dominated strategies. So in other sense, in any rational case, the players would not like to play that kind of strategies. So the real question is when or what, or is it possible that FTRL dynamics in last iterant case, their limit converges to a Nash equilibrium? And here is my theorem, and I am very proud about that result. It is very, very interesting. It is the following, that if you play no regret FTRL dynamics, then a point is asymptotically stable if and only if it is a strict Nash equilibrium. That means that, and that was the title also of the, that was also the title of the work, that mixed Nash equilibria and no regret learning, they do not mix as a notion. In other words, imagine that you start, what does it mean, asymptotic stability here? It means that even if I start very, very, very closely to the mixed Nash equilibrium, what will really happen is that I will diverge from the stability basin of attraction of that mixed Nash equilibrium, and I will not discover it. I will try not to be very tiring to everyone. I will give you, I think that sometimes words are less than a very good image. So let's see what you can observe here, what we observe here. Here you observe that the points that they belong to the basin of attraction of strict Nash equilibria, they converge to the corners. While in the case that we have the partially mixed equilibrium of one face of the simplex, then the equilibria, the dynamics can discover the support, but the only thing that they can do is to cycle around the equilibria without ever converging to that. Now, for the rest of the time, I don't want to be so precise. The only thing that I would say, because you will ask me how that happened, is because the no regret learning dynamics of FTRL, actually they are volume preserving. That means that if you start with an initial ball, with a ball of initial conditions in the payoff space, actually this ball maintains volume in the payoff space, and you can prove that there is almost a manifold sense one-to-one correspondence also to the state space of the strategies, but with a different volume measure definition. So what you will see probably is that you will the initial ball, the ball of initial condition in the strategy space will be deformed, but again, what you will observe is something like that. This is the multiplicative weight update case in the continuous dynamics. We started with the initial ball. We're playing matching pennies here, or rock, paper, scissors. And what I have is a ball of initial conditions. And as you can see, it preserves volume, but we observe just this deformity. And now I think that very, very intuitively, you can understand why we do not have the convergence, because convergence is a volume shrinking phenomenon. You want a ball of initial conditions that finally will shrink into the point. But while you have volume preservation in the whole field, that means that you will never achieve that. And now, just to give a very quick intuition, the only reason the strict Nash equilibria can survive is because actually the normal cone, for those that they belong to optimization area, because the normal cone of the simplex of that point is infinite. It's not like the point inside that each normal cone is the point that we want to converge, actually, the set that we want to converge. So in comparison with all the inside points that we want just to converge to that point, when we want to converge to the corner, it suffices to converge to any vector of the normal cone, that it is infinite, it has similar dimension with the initial ball, so the convergence is possible. But anyway, I don't want to be more tiring to everyone. The only thing that I would like to add is that we achieved to solve that case even in the discrete case, and more interestingly, not only in the discrete case, but also in the stochastic case where the payoff could have noise. And I really like that, because this is what even Nash asked in his thesis about how we should model the learning in the games, how the players empirically learn the information of the game, partially. Yeah, we describe the solution for all different discretization. We apply again this framework for all different discretization: optimistic FTRL, extra gradient FTRL, mirror prox FTRL, all these kind of discretizations. And again, the result was the similar one. That the only stochastically asymptotically stable points are the strict Nash equilibria. Of course, now we cannot leverage the volume preservation, that it is a very continuous dynamic machinery. We have to apply lots of machinery of min-max, of maximal inequalities in martingales, in submartingales. Some very, very interesting results. That also, just to wrap up a little bit, by putting also noise, you achieve two different things. You can both model the bandit case of full uncertainty of the players and the different biases that actually are the different discretizations that people nowadays describe in optimization. And we achieved also last year to provide for every different regularizer tight lower bounds and upper bounds of the rate to the strict Nash equilibria. And what I really like is that we describe a function that it is tight, and for any new regularizer that you will give me, I can present you exactly what is the function that computes the rate of convergence to the strict Nash equilibrium for that kind of regularizer in the FTRL setting. and with that case, for example, we reproduce with a very unified methodology the proof of multiplicative weight updates, or that it converts in linear time to a strict Nash equilibrium in a congestion game, for example, or the constant step performance that you have when you apply L2 regularizer. Anyway, that is a little bit the problems that I would like to describe in this talk. Just to conclude, what I want to pass as a message from this talk is that I strongly believe that it is very interesting for the theory of computer science to work in what I personally call theory for a real ML world, and that is separated in different components where I have done some work, at least, I hope. And I believe that there are different very interesting components like TFNP complexity, of search problems. And the very interesting with that kind of complexity results is that they provide lower, with using Nemirovsky's machinery, you can right now construct also unconditional results about lower bounds of typical dynamics that we use in optimization. Of course, like another word that I really work on it and I really like is the smooth kind complexity analysis, where you're trying to do beyond worst case analysis to see what is happening really in practice. Another thing that we didn't discuss about the optimization in the real world is what is happening with the representation power that our machinery has. What is the representation power of the neural net? This is something that we have as a community achieved a little bit to understand. There is lots of work to do, but there are questions about what is the representation power in distributional level of two neural nets that they are trying to learn a distribution as a GAN, for example. In the single optimization case, what is happening with the distributed case that I described in the beginning? What is happening in order to tame all this chaos and the chaotic phenomena that you see in the reinforcement learning in the multi-agent settings? All that are many interesting questions that I am really inspired, and I strongly believe that they construct from optimization perspective how someone could see the theory for a real ML world. Thank you very much. Sorry for a little bit more longer talk. Thank you very, very much for your attention.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Manolis, for this talk. Let's see if there's any questions. I'll ask something. Do you have concretely like most exciting, future direction for you, like a specific problem that you think you want to try to understand?
Yeah.
I guess this is recorded, so feel free to dodge the question if you want a secret. But yeah.
Oh, no. I mean, I think that there are three high-level but also concrete topics that I would like to understand. First, I will give two TCS questions and two optimization questions. In TCS field, I would like to understand what is the correct notion of an equilibrium, that it is between the second order stationary points that we know that in the game setting they are NP complete. What is happening with the local Nash is PPAD complete. Is there anything in between that we can attract? Is there anything below the what is the complexity, for example, of Stackelberg equilibria? We know some notions of local Stackelberg that they are computable. These are questions that for TFNP class, they are very interesting. And at the same time, I think that a very concrete question is, there is, for example, the smooth hardness of zero-sum games from Aviad. The question is, this is not so typical for complexity people, how someone can take this kind of results And smoothness is not something that you can preserve it through the reduction. So one question is how you can make reductions that they are smoothness, hardness, or smooth upper bound preserving. That would be something very, very interesting for search TCS community. Now, for optimization, I think that the first question that I would like to understand is what is happening with, for example, private optimization, what is happening with min-max private optimization. This is something that it is, while convex-concave, convex optimization, differential private is something that the lab of Vitali had achieved to understand. It is not so clear what's happening in the game setting. And the other question is what is happening with the federated case when we're trying to do optimization, the distributed optimization for gradient descent ascent. What is the optimal rates that we can get in the single agent and in the multi-agent case? These are somehow those four concrete but high-level questions that I want to tackle, and how I can use the machinery of discretization that I described during the talk to get a robust connection between the continuous and the discrete world.
Got it. Yeah, I see. Yeah, no, those are some cool directions. Thanks. Are there other questions? If not, thanks again for the talk. I'll stop the recording and then maybe we can hang out and just chat casually a little bit if people have time. Cool, thanks.
Okay, thank you very, very much, G.